me and Dave have a lot of stuff in common. I think one of the things that we bonded about super early that wasn't Metal Gear Solid was probably that we were both huge Kevin Smith fans, right? Maybe back like, what is this, like...
Key word doing a lot of work there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fair to say from his sort of peak of movie making and, well, I guess kind of time probably hasn't done his films the benefit of much good either. He's massively kind of fallen off in terms of his output, and I guess some of the stuff that he's done might not have aged as well.
He is probably one of the most, like, in terms of my intake of pop culture, one of the most important people in the development of my tastes.
Yeah.
In terms of one of the very first podcasts I ever listened to was Smodcast. It was pretty much just him and Ricky Gervais with a podcast when he first started that, right? Yeah. It was like, I think it was like the first podcast I subscribed to was probably Figure 4 Daily. And then after that was probably Smodcast. Yeah, so like really formative, and like the majority of his early films were at one point or another jostling for position in some of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, completely feel the same way as well. Like massive fans, a massive fan of Chasing Amy, a massive fan of Dogma. In terms of like wacky stoner comedies, absolutely loved the first Jay and Silent Bob movie. But then like Kevin Smith changed. There was like a drastic change in him. He made a film called Zack and Miri Make a Porno, and
which I quite like.
Which I think is good, and it wasn't a million miles away from a lot of the stuff that was coming around at that time.
It was just a bit too much him trying to do Judd Apatow, which, as has been pointed out, is very funny because when Judd Apatow showed up, he was trying to do Kevin Smith.
Yeah, exactly. I think the thing that made it more Judd Apatow was that, you know, he let Seth Rogen, Liz Banks, and a lot of the people in the movie do a lot of their own shtick. He kind of changed his tune because he was always very sort of by the book guy, and like the more he lets those people run, the more it just reminds you of the exact thing Judd Apatow does, which is just let those people run in a lot of his scenes, like have an outline and let them kind of go. So you're getting the same people doing the same stuff in a sort of like raunchy comedy. Because it had the word porno in a title, and for some reason he just steadfastly refused to remove it and just call it Zack and Miri.
And because Miramax released it at Halloween.
Yeah, but Miramax totally screwed him on it because he didn't want to make that change, and they were like, right, well, no cinema in the country's going to promote it. Like, they were right. As much as it is like, as a creator, like, that must be really frustrating, but America remains an extremely conservative Christian right-wing country in a lot of its landmass. So you can't have the word porno in the title of a movie, and therefore they just released it whenever and didn't have any faith in it, and it kind of broke him. And then he sort of took up smoking weed and moved more into his podcast. He did a good film called Red State, which I think is not a perfect movie. It's like a strange...
If you like famous character actor Michael Parks, it's one of the best movies at just letting Michael Parks be Michael Parks.
And John Goodman be John Goodman for the last half an hour as well. And
Michael Parks is genuinely chilling in that movie.
And it ultimately led to an even better movie, which was Argo, directed by Ben Affleck, because Ben Affleck saw Red State and just stole half the cast for the movie, because he was like, man, all those people would be great in a movie that has a bit more of a budget and probably a little bit more consistent. And he was right, and Argo won Oscars, and it was a fantastic movie, right? But then after that, he just kind of rehash after rehash, you know, like another, like he did like an animated Jay and Silent Bob movie, and then there was just, you know, a movie about, like, he tried to do the Red State scary thing again about a guy that makes someone into a walrus, just a joke from a podcast, and again it didn't really work. And Yoga Hosers is one of the greatest travesties of cinema that's ever been committed to film. It's so horrendous I couldn't even watch it.
Garrett, are you a fan of a bad cameo in a movie?
Do we mean bad cameo as in so bad it's good, or bad cameo as in it's so obnoxious I want to turn the movie off?
It would depend, because in Yoga Hosers, and he's in Tusk as well, briefly, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's better in Tusk.
Johnny Depp plays an Inspector Clouseau type French detective called Guy Lapont.
No, I'm on board with that.
Yep.
Who got roped in basically because Kevin Smith's daughter and Johnny Depp's daughter were best friends from like elementary school, and they both get cast as like the clerks in Yoga Hosers, who are also in Tusk as well, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Like a bit part cameo. So Johnny Depp basically did cameos in both movies for like the literal least you can actually pay a working actor in Hollywood.
Yep.
Things you do for your children.
He looked like he was having a blast. And in fairness, he only had to do one, but he came back to do Guy Lapont in the second one as well. So,
and I will say, in terms of cartoonish, horrible Johnny Depp performances, it's one of the least objectionable.
There's a long list of them.
Yeah,
it certainly is. Nothing's happened with him since, though. Johnny Depp, totally quiet time in his life.
Faded to obscurity.
Exactly. Anyway, so my confidence was and then there was the final Jay and Silent Bob reboot, which is a reboot of the first Jay and Silent Bob movie, which is like up its own arse meta to an insane degree, and it wasn't that good, sadly. And again, a film chock full of insane cameos of people that really should know better. But Kevin Smith is a lovely, lovely man, and I think he had a heart attack, and then people just kind of wanted to come and be in his movie. Like, fucking Chris Hemsworth is in that Jay and Silent Bob reboot movie. And in about 3 or 4 years, if someone's on Pointless and Chris Hemsworth is a category, that is absolutely going to be a pointless answer unless one of the 100 people they ask is Jack Lazel. You now, dear listener, because you're totally going to remember all of this. Anyway, that leads us into Clerks 3. So what I'm trying to set up is that my expectations as a former massive fan and now a lover of the man rather than his output was at an all-time low for Clerks 3. And I can safely say that it was all right. Now, there are parts of Clerks 3 that I like. I do think there's a really funny runner about Elias, who is the junior fun employee of Moobies from Clerks 2. He's back in Clerks 3, and it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but like Kevin Smith talks about it all the way through the build-up, so it isn't really. Basically, he based the early part of the story with Randall in the movie on his real-life heart attack that he had. So he gives Randall a heart attack, and Elias says like a funny line where he's like, I can't believe like Jesus would do this, like if Randall pulls through this, I'm going to renounce Jesus and worship Satan. So he pulls through it. So for the rest of the movie, Elias is appearing in more and more gothic, ridiculous level clothing. Like at one stage, he's like dressed like Gerard Way. Another stage, he's dressed like Robert Smith. It is spectacular. The cost, it looked like all of the budget went on the costumes and hair pieces that Elias was wearing in the movie. Very funny running gag. Some of the dialogue is pretty funny. Some of the concepts, like there's a thing about Elias trying to get involved with crypto and making like satanic crypto and selling it to idiots on the internet, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is cool, like up to date humor. And those are the things I like, and the relationship in it and the acting between Jeff Anderson and Brian O'Halloran as Dante and Randall is fantastic. It really is. They've always had a brilliant chemistry on screen, and that doesn't change. But fuck's sake, like the thing is, after Dante has his heart attack,
oh look, got a little by the way, but fuck's sake.
Yeah, after Dante has his heart attack, aside from like a really funny scene where they get loads of people in to audition, like he decides to make Clerks essentially. So Randall's thing is he's going to make the movie of the movie that he broke out in. And it is like, I thought Jay and Silent Bob reboot was like sucking its own dick meta, but this kind of takes it off the cliff of ridiculous, where you're literally seeing them reshoot scenes from the first Clerks movie in Clerks 3. and you're seeing them redo the same lines, the same dialogue. Like, there's no change up. They use the same locations because it's shot in the same quick stop and everything. And you just sat there and you're like, if this was just like a 2-minute montage of them making the movie and then the rest of the movie was new movie around it, it wouldn't be that jarring, and it would be like a nice little buzz of nostalgia. But it is a good sort of like 15-20 minutes of the movie just watching them reshoot scenes from the movie with no change or nothing or anything added to it. And that's just like, you just can't do that, man. And like, I can't imagine somebody watching this movie. Yeah, sure, you're probably not going to see Clerks fucking 3 if you didn't watch any of the other movies or didn't know much about Kevin Smith. But there are people that are being dragged to this movie now who are partners, who are friends, who are like, you know, just mums and dads maybe that like of kids, or kids of dads and mums who are going to see this movie with none of that context. Most of it is going to mean absolutely nothing to them. And like he was... Go on.
The thing I was going to say about it is that like the people that kind of referential stuff the people that would be most interested in that are the people who are the long-term hardcore Kevin Smith fans. But we're also the people that have seen and heard that story be told over and over. Like, once they did, what was the name of the documentary for Clerks X?
Snowball Effect. Yep.
Once you've seen that, you're pretty much done with your making of Clerks stories.
Yeah. Yeah, not just that, but the fact that his own best friend, who is a very funny guest on the podcast back in the day, Malcolm Ingram, made a documentary about Kevin Smith last year called Clerk, where he talks about the making of Clerks as part of it and covers his heart attack. So if you saw that, like, you don't need to see like 90% of this movie, essentially. But like, it is funny in places, it is heartwarming, it is nice, but there's just so much empty space in here of stuff that's just rehashed that we just don't need to see again. Like, there's some nice stuff with Rosario Dawson and Brian O'Halloran as well, like really nice scenes between the two of them that I enjoyed. There's a really funny scene in like the First Avenue Playhouse, which is actually where they did the original like cast auditions for Clerks, where you get like Freddie Prinze Jr., Ben Affleck, like Bobby Moynihan, Sarah Michelle Gellar, all of the Impractical Jokers, just like an insane like volley of like really famous people again who should probably all know better than to be in this movie, but like all turn up again because Kevin Smith is a very nice, likable person, and people just tend to say, okay, then I'll do your silly movie to him. But like, the fun things and the nice things and the well shot things and the emotional things in the movie don't make up for the fact that so much of it is just a bit of an empty shell, and that sucks. And I never wanted to get to the point where I felt this way about something that I formerly loved and a person that I do still admire him for his output, but I just think at this stage of his career, like, to be so like devoid of kind of new ideas, that you're just reshooting the first movie in the third movie that you're making and not necessarily even presenting it as a joke. Like in Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, the joke was that it was a reboot and it was like a meta commentary on reboots, whereas this isn't that. I enjoyed the parts of it that I enjoyed, but ultimately I just kind of feel disappointed by it, and that's sad. Because I really wanted to like this. I keep going into those Kevin Smith movies and I'm like, maybe this one.
This will be the one.
Maybe this one, like, I'll get back on the train of his output. But, if you haven't heard his stories, they're brilliant. If you haven't listened to his podcast, like, they're brilliant. If you haven't seen some of his early movies, even still now, like, there'll be stuff in them that you'll enjoy. But it's just... anything that's coming out from him now is just so beyond creatively bankrupt at this point.
Now, Jack, if you want to tell me that his next movie is going to be about Walt Flanagan's action figure hustle, yes. I'll be there day one.
Yeah, again, but that's a classic example of like, he's such a great storyteller. For somebody that's such a great storyteller, for somebody that could stand on a stage, if you didn't know anything about Kevin Smith, and he rounded up some of his best stories and stood on a stage for an hour and a half and told them to you, you would love it, because he's a fucking fantastic storyteller. Someone that's that good of a storyteller and like genuinely that talented as a writer, where at some stage in their life they've had imagination and original thoughts and like developed really cool things. To see him where he is now just sucks so bad, when so many of his contemporaries who came up in that sort of like mid-90s indie film thing have just progressed so far beyond him.
Yeah, this is a guy who came up around like the same time as, who is he
Tarantino,
with?
Robert Rodriguez, Richard Linklater.
Del Toro. Linklater was slightly before him.
Yeah.
Yeah, loads of those, you name them, of the 90s directors. Like, and yeah, he was like, there were people who were thinking he would be head of the class.
Yeah. I think The Shape of Water and Tusk came out in the same year, Dave, and that says a lot, really, doesn't it?